Australia was to be a white Australia, and that's where the white Australia policy started to come from. That policy banned Asian migration for the next 50 years in Australia. There was what you call a dictation test, where anyone entering into Australia who was non-European, non-British, were asked to take a dictation test, and a lot of them said, we speak English perfectly, we should be all right. But then they asked them to do this test in the language of Scottish language and Welsh language and all that, where it's sort of a bit ridiculous, just to make sure that they don't stay in Australia. Then the First World War came, and a lot of migrants who were in the country were restricted, and then we saw that because the First World War, we looked at Germany and Turkey and all that were involved. After the war, these people were banned from migrating to Australia for 5 years. So what happened then is migration started to pick up a bit from Greece and Italy when the US restricted migrants from Southern Europe coming to the country. And then we had a huge influx of Greeks and Italians. Up to now in Australia, there's huge communities of Greeks and Italians in Australia. Then in 1945, the government started promoting a new program called Populate or Perish. So they sort of said to themselves, all the Asian countries around us has a big population, but our population is very small. We better start populating our country. So what they try to do is populate it all by British migrants, because what he said here is, the minister, Ben Chifley at the time, said is, we must populate Australia as rapidly as we can before someone else decides to populate it for us, you see. So that's a program that they sort of went ahead with, and the government wanted the majority of the population to be Anglo-Celtic. They hoped that for every foreigner coming to the country, 10 would be from the UK, you see. In about 1950, Australia started to relax the white Australian policy. In 1958, they revised the Migration Act and allowed non-European people to come into the country. But again, the non-European coming into the country had to have certain attributes before they would accept them. The other people could come in even though they had no skills or any professions in that. Then what happened is, when we look at the Whitlam era, Whitlam passed laws that immediately sort of set aside the white Australian policy, and in effect there was no more white Australia policy. And in 1966, John Howard opened immigration to everybody, but saying that those who come must be suitable to settle in Australia, must have abilities to increase the productivity in Australia, and have qualifications beneficial to Australia. And so basically in 1972, I mean, just going back a bit, it was 72 where the Whitlam government abolished the white Australia policy. And in 1973, the Whitlam government said that Australia was now a multicultural society, you see. And in 75, they passed the Racial Discrimination Act, making racial discrimination illegal. So at the moment there is, when we sort of look at all this situation is, when they brought in the white Australia policy, there were plenty of Asian migrants in Australia at that time. The problem there was with those migrants were that they were discriminated against, but more so discriminated against were the Italians and the Greeks, you see. I mean, the Italians and the Greeks who came into Australia were unskilled people, and the population sort of discriminated against them on the grounds that they called them words like they were wargs. You see, everyone said, "Oh, here comes a warg." So basically, discrimination was the highest at that time, and jobs for them were hard because they couldn't speak the English language, because they came from working class backgrounds. Some are farmers. These things were really, at that time, wanted the country to be populated more by these people coming in. Then problems in Australia started in 1976 to 1982, when the first wave of boat people came from Vietnam. Australia, that was the phrase, the government, they readily accepted those migrants, and then what happened here is they were happy to take these migrants from the processing centers in Malaysia, Hong Kong, and Thailand. Then in 1988, they had this Fitzgerald inquiry, which set the groundwork for family reunions to be cut and give preference to skilled migration. So what happened here is a lot of Asian people who had families overseas were stopped from bringing their families in because they were not skilled. And so the basic there was no more families coming over unless you could prove you're skilled. And to prove the skill test, there were skill tests that I think most countries have it now. New Zealand has a skill test that sort of says you get certain points for certain things, and English is one, and other things are there too. So basically, what happened there was migration for families stopped, and in 1989, the second wave of boat people came. They came from Cambodia, Vietnam, and South China. In 1992, because of all the boat people coming into the country, Paul Keating at the time, who was Prime Minister, said that all people coming in without a visa had to enter mandatory detention. You see, that's what he did. And then again, what happened here is in 1996. No, before we go to 1996. We see in 1990, I think everyone heard of Pauline Hanson. She was a member of parliament. She was an independent member of parliament who in a maiden speech opposed Asian migration. You know, the same old story that she said, Australia is going to be Asianized. You know, we don't want people from Asia coming in. We basically want Anglo-Celtics coming in the country. There was a lot of opposition to that, but then there was also a lot of support for that because a lot of people wanted to bring back the White Asia policy. Then when the waves of boat people started coming in 1999, and that what happened was they started to have this new policy because we're coming to Christmas Island, having a new policy by saying that Christmas Island was outside the Australian migration zone, meaning is anyone who came there could not apply for a visa from there. And so basically they set up Christmas Island as a processing center. So that's to just deter people from coming to Australia so that they can't put an application for refugee or anything else there. So in 2001, the Howard government set up what they say the Pacific Solution, saying that asylum seekers coming to Australia will be processed in Christmas Island, Manus Island, and Nauru. So basically, what they thought was this would deter them to sort of taking the journey to Australia by coming by boat. And that policy was widely criticized, but still it went through. And as you see, most recently what happened here is the Julian Gillard government came to some arrangements with the Malaysian government to have all the processing of asylum seekers, boat people, be done in Malaysia. And from Malaysia, when the applications are approved, they be resettled, or not approved, they be told to go back. A lot of human rights lawyers sort of jumped up and down saying, you know, why Malaysia? Malaysia is not a signatory to any of these conventions on refugees. And they took the matter to the High Court. The High Court said the agreement with Malaysia was against the UN protocols on refugees. saying all that, if you look at a situation where there's a lot of boat people coming to Australia, at some stage for the whole year, there's about 25,000 boat people came to Australia. And that's in 1 year. But in reality, more illegals come by air than come by boat, you see. So it's just that we got this media hype up on that because you can see them coming, but if you come by plane, you don't see them coming, you see. So, I mean, that's the problem that we can see, you see. So at the moment, in Australia, there's about 2 million people born overseas in Asia. And it's gradually overtaking the Anglo-Celtic migrants who have come to Australia. Half of them came as students, and the other half came as skilled workers to Australia. Last year, Chinese-born people doubled their estimated of 386,000. Indian-born people trebled. It's now about 340,000 people. And if you look at Melbourne before was one of the biggest Greek-speaking sort of cities outside Greece. You know. But now the majority non-European people in Melbourne are Indians. So the demographics are changing quite a bit if you look at that part of it. And the other thing that you look at here is because the Asian migration is picking up meaning is even though they said no family reunion, only skill migration, Australia is obtaining all these skills from overseas. And all those skills from overseas are sort of basically building up the country at the expense, if you can say, of the Asian people. Like in Australia, most small businesses are owned by Asian people. I mean, there's more restaurants, Asian restaurants in Australia than other restaurants in other countries. There's big Asian communities in suburbs. Some suburbs are full of Asian communities. So what is happening now here is the most spoken language after English in Australia is Chinese, yeah? Because there's a lot of migrants coming in. And a lot of migrants coming in has also sort of increased business there because from the skill migration, there's business migration for a lot of migrants to come to Australia. So when we look at the situation in Australia, you will say, okay, you know, I mean, what they said before is right. This is the Asianization of Australia. But even though you may have, you know, a lot of Asian migrants, I mean, they could, in a couple of years' time, they can overtake migrants from other countries. But still, there's this little bar up there that if you look at the situation here is, in the leadership of the country, there's no Asians there, apart from the Labour Party, Penny Wong, who's the Minister for Finance. And if you look at radio and television, there's no Asian stars in there. And if you look at the movie stars, no television stars, no singers who are Asian, because there's always this, what do you call this, the Australian mafia up there, you know, not allowing people to come into places where unless they're allowed to come in. You know? So basically we look at a thing again and say, whose fault is this? So if we look at the Asian communities, like people coming to Australia, their main theme here is, we came from a difficult life, we want better education for our children. And so what they do is they push their children become first on everything. And their children are given tutoring, and they achieve their status because in Australia, in high school, I mean, throughout the country, you'll find that Chinese or some Asian extract always first in Australia. But when those people enter the workforce, you find that unless they can work somewhere, they can work on their own, maybe a doctor in their own practice or something else, they're not going to make it because they don't have social skills, because they've been studying all this time and doing all those things. So, as a lawyer in Australia, when I first came to Australia, it was in 1971, and I was heading for England, and even that was confirmed by this person who was a psychic, who says to me, forget England, it shows you're going to a country under the name of A, I said, no, I'm not going to Australia, forget it, not going there, And so I was involved in a lot of anti-government work those days, and I was told that I could not fly westbound, I could only go eastbound, I said, what am I going to do eastbound, I mean, there's nothing there, But I ended up in Australia, and ended up with 10 pounds in Australia. And I still remember flying to Australia by Pan Am, and on the plane there's about a dozen of us, so the whole plane. And there was a movie on the plane, and the lady says, do you want an earphone to watch the movie? I said, yeah, that's great. She says, that'll be $3. And I said, forget it. I only got 10 pounds. I'm going to give $3. And so when I sort of got to Australia, because it was at the end of the White Australia policy, it was a very scary place to be in because I come from Burma, and we've always lived in Australian Burmese communities with less Europeans around. So when you walk in there, everyone's European, no Asian, you sort of feel a bit scared, say, what am I doing here? I mean, everyone watching me, And so that's I think that's the attitude a lot of Asian migrants have in Australia, is being self-conscious. But then business-wise, I mean, they do very well in their businesses, and that has increased, Australian productivity. So if we look at situations all over the place, we see, one would expect that, the Asian people coming doing businesses and doing all those things. But then again, see, the government sort of tries to drag all that back by saying, okay, if you want to come to Australia now, you must have English skills, you see. Before, you had come in and work in Australia as a temporary resident if you're sponsored by a company for 2 to 4 years. That's all right. All of a sudden, they said, nah, you could have English skills. So there was a lot of Indian restaurants, and other people have restaurants, who have all these chefs who come in every year, because they don't want these people to be permanent residents, otherwise they take their businesses away and set up their own business. So all these chefs could speak English, but reading and writing, zero. So they couldn't get these chefs in, so all their business started to go down. But people who had British passports or New Zealand passports or Irish passports, no test for them, they could walk in, So those sort of things started to put a brake on, indirectly, on Asian migration. But each government is different, you see. So each time a new government comes in, they have different policies. And if we look at the new policy with this government here encourages Asian migration within limitations, is that you either have to have enough money to invest, or if you have that money, you must still have business skills. So you've got to bring the money in, plus you've got to have all that money to show that you're going to bring it to the country. So down the track here is the migration policy. On one part here is they wanted to attract wealthy foreigners by saying, if you bring in $5 million, you can come into the country, but then you must have business skills. So if you say, I got 5 million, they say, no, sorry, you don't sort of can't pass the business skill test, we don't want you. And also if you say, I got $5 million, they say, where do you get it from? So that's the next question. So what is happening here is Australia is trying to attract investors to come into the country, and because a lot of people are looking for secure financial growth, financial situation there, and